Welcome to the Living Undeterred podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Johnston, and I run the Living Undeterred project, I call it. We have a website by the same name. I host a weekly blog and a weekly podcast, which today, my special guest, and I feel like I've known her a long time, but I've only known her for about 90 days, if that. But we have so much in common, but we also have such a different, unique story. And Nancy Barrows is our guest today, and I'm honored to not just have befriended her on social media, but had the opportunity to actually have a lot of conversations on and off the record, trying to help each other both grow and learn and navigate through this crazy thing called life, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So, Nancy, why don't you just? I was looking at some stuff I saw on social media about you, and it just says Nancy, amazing human. So, is that the title? Is that your new title that you go by now? Maybe
Um,
tell everybody a little bit about you.
that was a given to title. I think it was Karina Dorothy Krill who gave me that one. It's humbling by all means. It's amazing to have how you're seen reflected back to you, and if that's how you're seen, wow, it kind of takes your breath away. A little bit about me. Well, I am Nancy, and by day, I am actually a speech language pathologist. And what I do during the day versus where I'm at and what I'm doing on social media are very different things. Although 3 months ago, those two worlds began to meet one another and become integrated. So I had never in my professional life shared about my story, and then coming onto LinkedIn, sort of the way it went was my best friend Raquel Boris has told me for years that I need to be on LinkedIn, and I am was one of those people who thought, oh, LinkedIn, I don't need a job. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not going on LinkedIn. And then she forced me. She forced me by putting a post out there saying that her best friend was new to LinkedIn because she knew I had an old profile. And please friend connect her and welcome her. And that just started, this amazing avalanche of just brilliant and wise and forthcoming, honest, genuine, caring humans into my community, infused that into my community, and I haven't looked back since because it was such a different experience than I've had in my immediate world with the people I reached there. And
Mm-hmm.
so I will give your audience the warning because I think it's fair
Yeah.
that this may trigger some of them, and it certainly will make most of them uncomfortable when we talk about my story. And that's okay. Receive it however you need to receive it. I'm not insulted if you're disgusted. I'm not insulted if you're anxious. I'm not insulted if you're curious. I've had all of those feelings myself.
Mm-hmm.
So please feel free to process it however feels right to you. So now I feel like I can jump in.
Yeah.
I was sexually abused by my grandfather till I was 16 years old. And at 16, what happened was a mandated reporter entered it into the system. So the secret that I had carefully guarded, as if my life depended on it because it felt like it did, was now fully exposed and unleashed. And that's the word I use to this day, unleashed on my family. Because up until then, my 16-year-old brain thought, well, I was the only one getting hurt before, and now look what I have done. Everybody I love is hurting.
Right.
Um, and that's something that took time to realize wasn't my doing, and that my people around me were being hurt anyway because of how I participated in the world because this trauma was occurring, repeatedly over time. Almost immediately, I began being a very restrictive eater, which
Mm.
quickly blossomed into full blown anorexia. And I was anorexic for years. And, at the time, I don't think I could have articulated that what it was about, but it's clear to me now after doing the work that, first of all, I had lost all control. My life had been
Mm-hmm.
based on me having control of the narrative, me having control of who knew, which was no one, me showing up as if everything was fine. I'm an Oscar worthy actress, and I lived my life so that I was remarkable enough to be unremarkable. Not you don't need to look at me twice. I'm academically doing well. I was thriving socially. There's no, well, she's great. Don't worry about her. She's not one of the kids that we have to worry about. And I will say that was when I was younger. That showed up a little differently.
Mm-hmm.
And we can talk about that. But yeah, I was anorexic for years. I wanted control back. I wanted that control back. Um, I hated my body, and
Mm-hmm.
I hated it for betraying me, because my body, every cell in my body was built to do exactly what it did. It was a beautifully um, programmed system that worked flawlessly. Sexual touch, pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
The problem
Mm-hmm.
was I didn't want it. I
Right.
didn't want it. I didn't want it to do that. I didn't want it to feel good. I didn't understand it when I was very young either. And so those messages got all bunched together and tangled up in a place that just made me hate my body for doing what it did. And then finally, I wanted to disappear. I am grateful that I never uh, experienced true suicidal ideation. And I know that is
Right.
something we can talk about, because you've been
Mm-hmm.
through a trauma that includes, suicide. But thankfully, that wasn't where my brain went. Where my brain
Mm-hmm.
went was, if someone's going to get a terminal diagnosis tomorrow, I'd go to bed at night and be like, okay, if someone's going to get diagnosed with cancer and it's terminal, give it to me.
Right.
Let that person who is loving life and has everything to live for, let them continue. I'll take that, kind of thing. And I think part of what saved me in terms of never considering with any detail or intent taking my own life was my empathy for the people around me. And somehow that remained front and center for me. That while I thought I was hurting them now, if I were to, take my own life and die by suicide, it would be so much worse for them. And
Mm-hmm.
so I guess my nature is, well, I rather suffer than make people around me suffer. So that was a blessing in disguise. When I was 20 years old, I confronted my grandfather.
Mm,
And
wow.
yeah, this is a whole story in of itself, but essentially, this was the precipitating event to my first major depressive episode, which there have been many of. I'm very honest about the fact that to this day, depression is one of the things that I still have in my life on, a regular basis. I'm not saying every day I'm depressed, but this is something that is with me still.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I went to confront my grandfather, and ultimately, what happened was he admitted to one thing that I didn't remember. I had no memory
Mm.
of, and that was just,
Shocking.
yeah, it was shocking, and it ripped my guts out.
Because now you're thinking, what else don't I remember? Right?
Right. What else don't I know? How much is there? Do I
Right.
need to know it all to heal? Can I handle knowing it all? Am I going to be able to know it all, remember it all? Right? It just became this, in my head, this black hole that kept sucking all of my energy out of, and certainly all of my hope and positivity out of me. And the second thing was is that I had been told, right, and I had gotten to a place of accepting that this wasn't my fault. Although for a long time I thought it was. I thought I was
Mm-hmm.
just as guilty as he was. I was just as
Right.
much to blame, that I had participated, that this was years and years and years worth of abuse. So at
Right.
some point, people are like, well, did you ever say no or tell anyone? I never even considered doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why, if it didn't feel safe or what it was, but I think part of it was I felt I was at fault too. So here I have someone taking responsibility, right? Even though it's one instance, he's taking responsibility. And guess
Right.
what? Not a thing changed. And I was
Right.
angry. And I was so low at the fact that I still have all of the crap that came with the abuse, all the maladaptive behaviors, all of the issues that I was struggling with were still mine, even though it wasn't my fault. It wasn't my
Right.
responsibility. I didn't get to hand this over, and say,
Right.
hey, yes, not my fault. You take this. I still had this massive ankle around my weight that I was dragging around all the time in the way of, the effects of trauma for me. And so that was, like I said, that was the precipitating event to my first major depressive episode. And I had to drop out of school. I was in college at the time, and it's taken me years to say that I dropped out, not left. I dropped out.
Mm-hmm.
I dropped out because
Right.
I couldn't be trusted on my own, or able to take care of myself in the ways that I was going to need to. And so I did come home. I came home, and I'm very lucky because my family has never once doubted me, has never once questioned, what I need or how I'm doing it. They've been incredibly supportive financially. They were able to pay for me to go to therapy, and they supported the therapeutic process. So I'm forever, ever, ever grateful to my parents, because they were also going through their own journey while watching their daughter suffer. And I can't imagine the strength and resilience that had to take for them to do. And so there's just an immense amount of appreciation and gratitude and awe for who they are and how they did it. But years and years and years of work, right? We can fast forward a little bit. There's a lot more in between. And I think, probably having seen me talk a bit more, you've heard more pieces of the story about my divorce and, how
Mm-hmm.
that was a slow recreation of comfortable discomfort for me and falling back into old patterns after years and years of, you know, doing the work. And you go,
I
oh,
have that phrase written down here, and you stole my thunder there.
oh,
But
sorry. You
I
didn't mean
wanted
it.
to ask you. I've heard you every single time you've spoken. I've heard you use comfortable discomfort, and I have it written down. I'm going to probably end up at some point writing a blog about that concept. It's a little bit similar to the vulnerability idea that I have got a little hung up on about becoming personally addicted to becoming vulnerable.
I want to talk about that
It,
too. Sorry, I'm going
yeah,
to
because I
interview
know
you in
last
a
night
second.
when I watched you speak, and again this will post shortly, but I watched a recent presentation you did, or a conversation I like to call them, and I think we had talked, or you had talked to somebody about that vulnerability idea, and so again, I think people that know my story, that follow my living undeterred mindset podcast, whatever, know that we survived a very difficult traumatic event, and that's the loss of a child to a heroin overdose less than 4 years ago. And, in listening to you talk about uh, people's trauma is so unique to them that there is no template out there. There's just guide rails that we bounce back and forth, navigate through, and meeting other people I met on these platforms are just adding more thickness to the guide rails. So we have a little more comfort when we bounce around as we go through each day. But that comfortable discomfort phrase just resonates with me. Can you tell me what you mean by that, and is it any different than what I think you mean by it?
Well, I'll tell you what I mean. You tell me if it's different. So, my comfortable discomfort describes our ability to fall back into familiar patterns that, because we know them so well, because we've lived in them for so long, are comfortable, right? We can do it, but there's discomfort in living that life. I can use my divorce as the example. I fell back into old patterns through
Mm-hmm.
that had existed in my abuse relationship. I had no voice. I could survive on breadcrumbs. I didn't need anything. You don't need to notice me. I'm going to keep you happy because that keeps the peace, and then if you're happy, no one's looking at me. And I was able to slowly do that over time, seamlessly,
Mm-hmm.
because I knew it. So the comfort of knowing it and being able to do it, that's that part. The comfortable discomfort is when you stay in that for too long, especially if you've done the work or are starting to become aware, it becomes really uncomfortable, right? So you have this comfortable
Mm-hmm.
discomfort. You fall back into this thing that you know and can do easily, but it's not right. You're not thriving. You're not your best self. You can feel that. And that's a place of huge potential growth, but it's also something if we're not mindful of. And I fell into the trap, 16 years of marriage, and it was not all bad, and he is not an awful human by any means.
Right.
um, but I allowed myself to fall back into that, and over the course of 16 years I lost myself, and finally became aware of what was happening, and that comfortable discomfort was what propelled me forward to make a change. It's also this comfortable discomfort about talking about things like sexual abuse
Mm-hmm.
and heroin addiction and
Mm-hmm.
suicide and all sorts of other traumas that are happening in the world. Um, we need to get comfortable with the discomfort. So I use the phrase
Mm-hmm.
two ways. So then there's the getting comfortable with the discomfort. So right now, I'm sure there's people who are, not that they're not loving the conversation, because most people are open to it, but in being in it or around it, there's discomfort, right? So we
Mm-hmm.
need to create some comfortable discomfort so that we don't pull up and out of these discussions and keep walking away, um, before anything really changes or happens. So, can you sit with your discomfort in the most comfortable way you can? And how do we do that? Nobody's ever going to be comfortable with sexual abuse. I mean, I hope
Right.
not, and talking about it. But we can be comfortable with the discomfort it brings. And,
Mm-hmm.
that's how I see it. And my other thing, and I know you've heard me say this before, is I'm so frustrated with the fact that we have had the cure for this disease
Mm-hmm.
all along.
Yeah.
And it lies in that comfortable discomfort, right? So if we were talking about this openly and we were telling our kids and teaching our kids about boundaries and their bodies, and if it does not feel good to you, that's all that matter. It doesn't matter if it would feel good to me or not. It doesn't matter
Mm-hmm.
who it is that's making you feel uncomfortable, and giving them absolute permission to own that and share it with someone. And on the other side, of as adults, we were creating a safe space that we were honoring and following through on what we say we will do in terms of that. If you're having that conversation, that we have a place of receiving without um, judgment, without
Mm-hmm. Right.
trying to fix it, with in a place where you can reassure the person that they're loved, and that the fact that they've shared this piece of themselves with you doesn't change anything. Because that was a big thing for me when I would tell. I was always worried that people would look at me differently or not love me anymore, or whatever judgment came in my younger self. But if we were doing all of that, there would be no safe haven for someone who was a perpetrator.
Mm-hmm.
Because if they knew kids would talk and knew adults would receive, there's no safe place. There's nowhere to go. So, comfortable discomfort has quite a few meanings to me, and I don't know if any of those matched with what you were thinking. And if not, I'd love to hear yours, because I think everybody's interpretation, is is they go to what aligns with them.
Right. And we always revert back to survival instincts and coping mechanisms we learned as a youngster, fight and flee or adapt, those type of things. I wrote it down something that I think I would like to see more people talk about, because I see a lot of people that make comments on post traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, and most people think of the veteran coming back from a war, and he's seen things that are just traumatic, and he can't find a way to live. But post traumatic stress disorder could be sexual abuse. It could be losing a child to a heroin overdose laced with fentanyl. It could be anything. There's a spectrum, I guess, of trauma out there. No different than autism or ADD or any other thing. There's always a spectrum. So in my research for my book, this one's for you, An Inspirational Journey Through Addiction, Death, and Meaning, I came across this idea called post-traumatic growth. And I'd never heard it before. And it's about 3 pages in my book I wrote about. And I think you are a living example of post-traumatic growth. And again, I am, just because of what I think I'm doing with my Living Undeterred projects I'm on,
Right.
is that I've taken this traumatic event that for some people, not most, not all, but for some, it may have been the end. It may have been suicide. It may have been alcoholism. Could have been drug abuse. Could have been whatever. No different than you. You had something horrendous happen. And I guarantee you there's people watching that have had somebody that they know has either died or is addicted or has dealt with someone with sexual abuse. I mean, you and I probably covering 90% of everyone watching this show.
And for
So
most people, they don't think they know someone who's been through it,
they
but I
do. Yeah.
guarantee you do. Unfortunately, the
Once you
numbers.
start talking and you become vulnerable, then the floodgates open. But going back to post traumatic growth, had you ever heard of that phrase? And do you think that I guess if you haven't heard about it, you wouldn't be able to comment on it. Had you ever heard of that phrase and
I hadn't
anything about
until
it?
just now, and of course, I can still comment on it, because just I'm a talker, and I share my thoughts pretty freely. I love the empowerment. Post traumatic stress disorder. Right there, we've got a
Right,
disorder.
exactly. Yep.
There's a connotation there. There's a words to me are very important. To me, no word is void. They all carry weight and they all mean something. So I'm very big about trying to be careful about my words and notice the words I use, and reframe things. And so, yeah, when you can take it from a place of disorder to a place of growth, it's empowering. And I think it also gives you the sense, or gives me the sense, that I have some control over it.
Hmm.
I can grow, I can change, I can participate in that process. And for me, I say all the time, I don't know what or how or why I can tell you, yes, I was tenacious and I had resilience and all of that. But I don't know where that came from, where that little girl, 4 or 5 year old, she had that well beyond her years.
Right,
And she,
right.
she survived. She did everything she could, um, to get me to a point where I could heal. And there were times going through it that I couldn't connect to her and I didn't like her very much. But that was my, 40-year-old brain judging a 5-year-old as opposed to thinking about a 5-year-old and what they would have to do to survive that. And
Right.
so part of what for me happened and what went from surviving to thriving in this post-traumatic growth process was really learning to have gratitude for it all,
Mm-hmm.
for every crappy moment, for every snotty day, for every unshowered day that was part of this, to have complete gratitude for it, and especially for that little one through over the years, just man, is she a fierce warrior that got me to a place of being able to heal. And when I had gratitude for it, I switched from survivor to thriver, and that was huge for me. And I
Mm.
think it's one of the things that propels me to tell my story, to let people know like there's more than just surviving and there are ways to get to thriving. And the value of my story, yes, I'm here and I can do this and I can share my story, and that's valuable. But I think for most people, the ugly in between is really where the
Mm-hmm.
value comes from. Because if if I saw me right as I am today, when I was going through my journey, I would have hated me. Like, oh look, she's got her crap together and she's so happy, and look at her, she's successful and she's doing her thing. And but right, I couldn't relate to me at all when I was in the process. But if
Mm-hmm.
someone like me shows up and says, yeah, you know what, I have laid on the bathroom floor and cried myself to sleep. I have gone without showering for 3 days. I've lied to people and said I have plans when I'm doing absolutely nothing because I don't want to deal with people. Those places of being stuck and feeling like I was in that dark hole again, that was deeper this time, and I was going to climb out of it for what reason? So I could be back here again, that cycle. I had all of that and more. I mean, there's so much more. But for one person to understand, even what I talk about, every cell in my body doing what it was meant to do, I am sure there are other people out there, men and women, who felt the way I did, that their body betrayed them, right?
Right.
That it just was this complete and utter betrayal of ourselves. And maybe they're ashamed. I was ashamed that at some points my abuse was pleasurable. And I know that's really uncomfortable for people
Mm-hmm.
to hear, right? You want to think of it being not, sounds wrong, give me a minute to talk it out. You want to think of it
Yeah.
being an awful experience, right? That's,
Right.
not because you want me to have suffered, but that
Right.
that works how our brains like it to
Mm-hmm.
to hear that there was pleasure involved is really unsettling for a lot of people. But there's
Mm-hmm.
someone out there that me saying that they just exhaled for the first time in a long time, in a
Yeah.
long,
And you
long
said
time.
the
And so,
needle hasn't moved forever on sexual abuse, and so
no,
you are moving the needle. And I think I think by you keep continuing this story, somebody, boy or girl, is going to walk down the hallway to their parents or their counselor or their teacher and say, "Hey, I need to talk to you." And as parents, we need to be open minded on these things. Something I thought of when you were talking, and it's a phrase that I've used a lot in my writing and just kind of my philosophy, is something to the effect that ultimately, to achieve true peace in your life, you need to be as far from peace as you can. You need moments as far from peace as you can. And so you talk about this black hole pulling you in. Well, maybe sometimes you need to have that so you really can understand what true peace really is, because you're really as far as away from peace as you can be. And I was on my floor in my kitchen, 3 months into my book, 3 in the morning, couldn't breathe, cried every tear that I possibly could, and almost not just didn't finish the book, but almost just didn't finish living. And I have no idea what happened. I just, and I'm not a religious person, so I'm not gonna subscribe it to divine intervention, because that would be a cop out for Jeff Johnston. Maybe some people that explains everything, but for me, I guess I wasn't going to use that as a reason why I decided to start, not finish, but just start living. And I'm kind of stuck on that phrase. To get to true peace, I have to get to the worst places possible. I've been there, and I know you've been there too. And uh, it's it's difficult to explain to people because I've never had thoughts of suicidal ideation as well, but I have had thoughts of suicide. I guess there's a difference. I tell people too that I've never been depressed, but I have depressive moments. So for me, it's the same way that I've kind of tricked my brain to not say I have depression because then I have a label. If I say I allow myself to have depressive moments, well, I can have my depression but not be depressed. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it does. And I'm a big believer in words, so I definitely feel how that shifts things. Um, and we've talked about labels. I have cat hair stuck to me. I'm so sorry.
That's
We've
okay. I have a cat
yeah.
too.
This is part of my life here. When I talk about showing up genuinely and authentically, welcome to my world.
Yeah.
That labels can be helpful. They can help people understand things. They can help
Right.
us attack things from a more comprehensive view of it. So even like PTSD, all the different symptoms of PTSD, if we try to address all of those separately, we're going to be
Right.
far less successful than if we know that these are all part of the same thing, right? But
Mm-hmm.
PTSD, spoken of as post-traumatic growth, and it encompasses all of these types of issues, symptoms, beliefs, experiences. Well, that's a huge difference. It helps us to understand that they all go together, but that, that label doesn't make me feel broken. And I spent a
Mm-hmm.
lot of my life feeling broken beyond repair. And you're right, in that deep, dark hole is where my growth happens.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
the growth is in the struggle. And I work in the public school system, and I say this all the time because, we want to save kids. I don't want them to suffer, but learning that you can struggle through it and find your way.
Yeah.
Um, is a huge moment of growth, right? So we
Yep.
don't want
I
to
would
take that
agree.
away from anyone. It doesn't always feel good. And my moments of growth are not always at the bottom of the deep, dark pit, but
Right.
many of them have come from there. But all of them have come from the struggle. All of them have come from the discomfort and the struggle and the place of hurt is the word that keeps coming to mind. A place of hurt, of hurting, having
Pain.
been
Pain.
yeah, being in pain. And the mental wellness journey, and I joke, is not this thing where you get there and you graduate and someone gives you a plaque and you hang it on the wall, right?
Yeah.
It sounds really lovely that way that I've done all my work and I'm good. I've done all my work. I am good, but I
Right.
will remain human for the rest of my life. I will
We
remain
talk
human for the
about
rest of
yeah, we both are stuck there, I guess, in a good way. But talk about labals. I detest labels as well. However, if we're gonna have them, might as well have good ones.
Yep,
Might
right.
as well have the good labels. So my sons and I, Roman and Ian, my other two boys, we speak at the high school here every year to students, typically eighth grade, ninth grade kids, right around the age of first use, which in the United States is 14. And I always
Wow,
start my presentation.
let that sink in for a second, right?
Yeah, it's just insane, and parents just don't realize. And you and I could go off on that tangent for an hour, and that's kind of what got me into this realm of living undeterred was the addiction and the substance abuse arena. But then I meet people like you, and there's all other things out there. But hold what you're going to say for a second, because I want to cover this thing on the word addiction. I start off my class often by saying, okay, who can name addictions? And inevitably, these kids, and they fall into my trap. They all say alcohol. Maybe they'll bring up sexual abuse if they have the courage to use that word. They'll say, stealing, lying, pot, vaping, and I'll say, yeah, those are all addictions. But how about telling the truth? How about eating healthy?
Mhm.
How about working out? How about avoiding toxic relationships? How about reading? How about writing? Those are addictions too. And they're like, yeah, but those are positive addictions. So I'm not out here, telling people to avoid all addictions. I actually love addictions. And I take some heat when I post this on social media because I don't think people understand. I'm being a little bit sarcastic when I say that. Obviously, my son was an addict. He died from heroin. So if there's anybody that hates addictions, it's Jeff Johnston. But I'm also not naive. I also understand that part of my learning journey is to start using these words that would be so easy for me be my unwinding, but use them as my inspiration. And so I love addictions. I do. I'm addicted to my podcast. I'm addicted to meeting people like you. I'm addicted to writing about whatever I can think about. I have ADD, so it's easy for me to write. I think you have ADD too. Yeah. So I have no problem creating content, and I think that's what's going to propel you, Nancy, to a. You're going at the speed of light with this thing, and I'm just happy to kind of be holding on for the ride. I watched the velocity of your story on social media, and it's like, man, I know her when she was, it'll be one of those stories. But anyway, I don't know why I got off on that, but I think it's important for us as we start navigating through the label aspect. I go back to Adderall. My son was labeled ADD, given Adderall, and that was the open to the door of his addiction issue, was Adderall. So if I got somebody out there that they're bipolar, or they've something's happened to them where somebody's labeled them, and they're now start thinking, well, I got to go get drunk, or I got to go kill myself or cut myself or whatever. I guess I feel compelled to step in and start trying to teach kids to make better choices. That's what it comes down to. Not telling them what not to do, just telling them that choices have consequences, right?
Right. Yeah, there's outcomes, right? And consequences also sounds like a negative word. I always say I feel obligated and compelled. Obligated is not a bad word in this sense. I feel obligated
Mm-hmm.
to tell my story. I was
Mm-hmm.
given the gift of thriving. I was given the gift of getting through it. I was given the gift of the family I have. And so, yeah, I do feel obligated, but not in a bad way at all. You talk about addictions, and I usually just use maladaptive behaviors and adaptive behaviors. So we can talk about it however we want, but it doesn't mean there's only bad. I totally get what you're saying about addiction. Like, can I be addicted to positivity and gratitude? Yeah, I am. Those are my, pro-adaptive behaviors that I have taken on in place of my maladaptive behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
And just to let you know, hold on tight, because I intend to be the woman known as the woman who changed the narrative on sexual abuse. So I would love to have you with me that entire journey along with me. I've gotten to a point where I'm no longer outrunning my past. I'm actually
Mm-hmm.
grateful to bring it along with me.
Right.
And yeah, hold on tight, because I would love for you to be with me the whole way, because I am on my way to being the woman who changed the narrative on sexual abuse. And, I appreciate being you reflecting back to me the way I'm seen, and how my journey looks from the outside, because it's very hard when you're in it, and it feels so purposeful and you're on the right path. Um, I want to say it's a labor of love, but it just is. It's what I'm driven to do. It's what feeds me, helping others, telling this story over and over. And there are so many pieces of it that I haven't even gotten into yet. There's a whole
Right.
story around the confrontation. There's a whole story about all sorts of things. But my job is to keep talking. My job is to keep talking. My job is to talk about, yes, there are things that come out of this that are just really hell in a handbasket, and sorting through it is going to be very hard, roll up your sleeves work. It's not a journey, it's a Spartan run. A journey sounds like there's going to be
Right.
cute little woodland animals and flowers, like little birds that bring me ribbon, I don't
Right.
know. But it's a Spartan race, and it's okay to stop and rest. um, what is not okay is to just stop. And
Do you
I
believe? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, it's okay. I understand wanting to stop, but it's again the word. You're allowed to rest. You're allowed to pause.
Do you believe things happen for a reason?
Absolutely, 1,000%, without a doubt. I'm a big, yeah, the universe is conspiring for my best good. I think everything that's happened has happened for a reason. It's happened so that I can be here today talking about this when other people have a really hard time doing so. I believe that I ended up working with kids for a reason. And I worked in a
Mm-hmm.
certain area of Los Angeles where kids really were experiencing trauma on a daily basis, so many different traumas, food insecurity, housing insecurity. There may be abuse in the home. There may just be a lack of personal space with many people living together. The way children are fed into their souls and love. There's so many traumas. Parents in jail, there are shootings. And I could show up as me, having been through trauma in a very different way from someone else who hadn't been. When the behaviors came out, I saw them, and I saw them as cries for help, and I saw them as little beings who didn't have a better way. It doesn't feel good to be enraged and crying and screaming and throwing things around your classroom. This
Right.
doesn't feel good. If
I
my kids had another way, they would. And my job is, hey, let me offer you another way. I see that you're hurting. I see this is a big feeling. You are important to me and I want to help you, right? Let's, like you said, see that there are choices. See that there are skills you can learn. And I think I went way off from the question you asked me.
No, no, no. I
Um,
don't know. I don't know if I asked a question.
okay.
But you use the word gratitude every single time I've heard you speak, which has been now I think into the hundreds now. Um, but you use the word gratitude, and I will tell you, I know you meditate, right?
I do.
Okay, so I do as well. I use mindfulness meditation, which is kind of a popular one. But in my meditation practice, I kind of revisited a philosophy that I got kind of introduced to back in college called Stoicism and the Stoic philosophers. And Marcus Aurelius and Seneca and some of these individuals kind of had these mindsets that they developed to help them deal with life, adversity, grief, trauma, etc. But they practice something called negative visualization, and it's the concept of when you see somebody or you think of or you let's give you an example is you're tucking in your child to go to bed at night, and you for a moment pause that this may be the last moment you ever see them again. It could be a fire, their heart could just stop, and many things could happen. Carbon monoxide poisoning. It's not thinking negative; it's actually thinking positively. It's called negative visualization, but you're taking a mindset of gratitude that hey, they're not here. They're here right now. I have to be grateful for that. And I think back to my life, specifically when Seth died. And, I write in my book about the last moment that I had with my son. And he'd been in prison for something that I won't spend time with, but he had spent time in prison. And he got out of prison and he kind of expected to move back in our house. And I had two other boys, and at the time I was married, and I thought, well, this isn't a good environment to have him come back in. So he's in our garage. He's upset with us because we told him that he couldn't come back in. And as he got his boxes and was with his friends, I just turned around and said, Seth, you need to quit drinking. And that's the last thing I ever said to my son. I never got to tell him I love him. And I will forever use that moment to remind me that I will never let people get away from me without telling them I love them. And every frickin' moment of every frickin' day, I tell my boys I love them obsessively. And, I don't do it enough with my parents. I don't do it enough with my brothers. And, boy, if that's not a life lesson, I would just love to have the opportunity to tell them, I'm sorry.
Please don't apologize.
But I guess the reason I tell this story is that as much as that sucks to have to go back and live in that moment, it's made me such a better human being. It's made me such a better man. Made me such a better dad. I mean, it's going to make me a great ex-husband, a great business owner. Uh, and Seth knows I love him. That's the thing. But anyway,
That was one of the things that came to mind while you were talking is yes, we take every opportunity. You feel like maybe you don't tell the people in your life that you love them enough, but I am certain, Jeff, from knowing you, that you are constantly showing them. You're communicating it to them, and it's not the same necessarily. And for us, saying it out loud is pretty powerful, but so are our actions. And I come from a family. I'm so lucky. I come from a family where you can't leave to go to the grocery store without kissing everyone and hugging them and telling them you love them before you get in the car.
right.
Every time you go somewhere, every time you do something, like, oh, I'll be right back. Well, okay, fine. I'll be right back. I love you. I'll see you in a minute. I'll be right back. Hug, kiss, goodbye, out the door. And for some people, that would be totally overwhelming. I get it. Um, for me, I take great comfort in it. I'm grateful for every moment I have, and I can definitely see the negative. I'm not, okay, living in a place of gratitude does not mean that I'm always happy. Living in a place
Right.
of gratitude does not mean that I Pollyanna all the negativity away and I don't see it and it doesn't exist. It means that within all of that, with it being imperfect, with it being painful, with there being things going on that are negative and difficult and hard to stomach, I can continue to turn to a place where I'm grateful for what is and what is good and what is coming. And I've learned, right, that the struggle means something good. I've learned that I can remain grateful even when I'm feeling like there's not a whole lot good going on. Even if it's just to be grateful that I'm aware, I feel, I'm in this moment, and I'm given an opportunity to make it to the next moment, which may be very different. And life is
Yeah.
comprised of moments, tons and tons and tons of moments. And so for me, yeah, I think that's really important when people are like, oh, yeah, no, I'm not always happy. And no, I'm not always chipper and positive.
Right.
And I bitch and complain.
Right.
And I allow myself that, but then I come back to what's more true and more helpful are the things that I am so blessed to have and receive, and people in my life, and the love and support. And it's not easy every day. It becomes an ingrained habit where you can't stop doing it, and where you are aware in a very beautiful way of everything as it happens. Yes, the negative, but if you're aware of the negative, you also become aware of what's coming out of it. But when can be aware of the beauty that's happening, the synchronicity, the lack of resistance, and what is being put in front of me, which is what you've been witnessing, right? Where this whole, you say that I've like skyrocketed on social media or whatever. I don't remember your exact words. I apologize. But
That's okay.
that is all my awareness in terms of I see that. And how cool is it to see it in the moment that this is happening and really appreciate it and really have gratitude for it right then and there. I don't have to understand it. This was I do affirmations daily and I post them quite frequently. And this was one of mine the other day. I don't have to understand to move forward.
Hmm. Well, I use a quote very similar. A willingness to accept not knowing doesn't equate to not searching. So
Right.
for me, when I say I don't know if there is X, doesn't mean I'm giving up. It doesn't mean I'm not going to keep looking. And so I think a willingness to say you don't know something is courageous. I don't know what the answer is for people out there struggling with things. All I can do is tell you what's been the answer for me. And you threw me off with that synchronicity word because I had that written down to talk to you about that. But I had like nine other things I wanted to talk about. And with
I probably should have warned
ADD,
you I'm a little bitchy. I tend to,
no, no, I'm really trying to get better to listen to people because I have so many things in this ADD head I want to talk
I
about.
get it.
But I wrote down some things from a past talk you did about creating your own safe space. And you mentioned the word sensory diet. And I never heard that word before. And tell me see, it's hard for people to understand because this is my safe space.
Mm-hmm.
Crying is my safe space. Talking about Seth till I'm just out of tears is my safe space. It
Right.
sounds perverse. It's almost like I'm self torturing myself. But I need it. It's like that's what keeps me going. And safe space to me isn't a little box where I'm in hiding from the world and I don't want to talk about things. That's a prison. That's not a safe space. And I don't want to live in a prison,
Yeah,
for
safe space
me.
isn't a place where nothing bad happens, right? That's not
Right,
necessarily a safe space. I'm
right,
going to quote Finding Nemo when, Marlin says about Nemo, I promised him I would never let anything happen to him. And Dory looks at him and goes, well, then nothing can ever happen. Like nothing good could ever happen. Nothing
right,
can happen to him, right? You can't, not, if
right,
you promise nothing's going to happen to him, nothing's going to happen to him, which sounds really
right.
great and a way of protective. Um, but okay, so let me answer the question because I know we do have a time limit. So sensory diet, and I think this was a conversation was this Connected Human Conversations?
Could have been, or it could have
I
been
think it
back
was.
with, I wrote it down. Let your mayhem be heard.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's all there. I know I also talked about, I think, on Island of Misfit Toys with Mike Paterano,
Okay.
and the co-host. But so really this term comes from kids and sensory regulation, and lots of time used as a behavior approach to things that are happening with kids when they get dysregulated. And now I'm using all my professional words, but it's like when kids can't manage themselves, right? And they are seeking something that they're missing. It's a pretty basic concept. Sometimes it's sensory input. We have lots of kids that are hypersensitive, and every little thing, the kids that can't have a tag on the back of their shirt, or if there's like noise in the background, they can't study. But we also have kids that live in what we call under arousal. They're not getting enough sensory input to feel safe in their world, know where they end and the world begins. Like, even like I talk about, my nephew used to be like water in a chair. He didn't
Mm.
even like understand where he was compared. He just was liquid, right? In the chair, he just everywhere. But a sensory diet is not something we physically eat. It's not a bunch of foods, but it's feeding your body sensory information. And so for some kids, it's deep pressure, right? And for some adults, it is, right? That whole weighted blanket thing that became big a couple of years ago,
Yeah.
that's something we used for kids who had sensory deficits, right? To give them additional pressure or pressure into your joints, like doing wall push-ups and stuff like that. That additional information, it may be things like, I often do this, and maybe that's a place where my body is seeking a little bit more sensory input to stay grounded, or stay focused. It came out of a conversation as I was watching Mike Paterano. He did a really
Yeah.
beautifully vulnerable video on his YouTube channel, and the whole time he was sort of rubbing his scruff all different ways. And I talked to him about it, and I said, this may not resonate with you, but I feel like that was your grounding. Like, you needed that
Hmm.
sensory input. So when you're leaving your body in these hard moments, right, or whatever it is, or we're zoning out, that sensory input, that sensory diet can really help us ground and feel safe and anchored and centered. And I'm like you. My safe space isn't one where nothing bad happens. My safe
Right.
space is where I can be me. My safe space is where there are people around me who love me for me, but also want to see me be my best self. So they will be honest with me, um, about the things they see. They won't be aggressive about it, but they'll
Hmm.
allow me a moment to try those things on and see how I feel about it. And so, yeah, creating safe space, I think, for ourselves is really important. We talk about other people creating safe space for ourselves, for us when we need it, but really creating safe space for yourself is huge. And for some people, and this was part of the conversation, it means, pulling back a little bit from social media and not being as available, to just say, okay, I need this time for me, and this is what I need to do in this time.
Right.
Another thing is we use the word self-care, right? What is your self-care? I struggled with this for a really long time because I was trying to figure out what I do as self-care. What do I do for self-care? And the reality is, I don't do anything. My self-care is when I do nothing, when I don't
Mm.
schedule anything, when instead of stopping to get my nails done, which might be self-care for someone else, I come home, put on my pajamas in my bathroom, and I sit on the couch
Hmm.
and I just let myself be. So all of these things, and I definitely have gone off from what you
No,
asked.
no.
Sensory diet, sensory input is really important for most of us. So think of it, if you're an adult and you're in a meeting. I tend to take notes, right? Sensory input. I've got paper pencil input, the way it feels, my arm moving. If you uncross and cross your legs, if you bounce your
Right.
leg,
That's what I
you're
do.
giving
Yeah.
yourself into
Yeah.
you're unknowingly creating sensory input for yourself, and lots of us need that. It's easy to detach. It's easy in the world that we live in to sort of float outside your body. And if you are like me and have had trauma, one of the big things is dissociation, being outside of your body, not being
Hmm.
connected to your body. I will have those days that I'm working so busily that I don't recognize that I'm hungry till I stop and think if I'm hungry, and then I'm ravenous, but I didn't feel it until then because I wasn't
Right.
connected with my body. And that happens for people in all
Right.
sorts of ways. So yeah, the sensory piece, I think we use it a lot about, like I said, children. And if you look up sensory diet, you Google it, it's going to be about kids. But I think we're neglecting a whole population of people that are,
Well,
you know,
when you first said that, I thought of the term anchoring in meditation, because when you're meditating and you see a thought and you can't let it go back to your breath. To me that's when I heard you say the word sensory grounding. I immediately, the analogy to me was in meditation. It gets me back to what I came there to do, and that was to be aware. You know, and so I think for kids, I go back to my passion in helping adolescents make better choices. I developed a system called the Don't Start Initiative, and it's something that I read about in my book. I woke up at 5 in the morning. I keep a pad of paper by my bed, and I just started writing down all this stuff. And I came up with this DCI acronym using the ABC model: awareness, breathing, choose. And so what I wanted to do is talk to kids that you're at the parking lot, football game, you're in seventh grade, and somebody comes up with a six pack of beer. Okay, now you're in that position where your whole life, your parents have been telling you this is going to happen. Mom and dad ain't there. Nancy isn't there. Jeff's not there. Your teacher isn't there. Your guidance counselor's not there. Your brother and sisters. It's you and your three friends. So I thought, okay, what is a quick way for a kid to work their way through this? Just say no doesn't work. It does for some. It doesn't for most. So I came up with the Don't Start initiative. So the awareness is the first thing. That's the A. So kids can sit there and go, okay, ABC. Jeff said ABC. Awareness. Okay. I'm aware I'm in a situation that I've been told about. Okay? Now I breathe. So I don't answer yes or no. I don't do anything. I just take a deep breath and I think about a response. Because I have to respond. And in doing so, previous to this, you can set yourself up and you can think of 2 or 3 canned responses. Mm-hmm. Hey, I can't. My parents are coming to pick me up in 30 minutes. You have them prepared. They're lies.
Yeah.
They're lies. Yeah, or I'm on medication. I'm on a new med for poison ivy. I can't, just come up with some BS lie to get you out of that situation. And so awareness, breathe, and then choose. And I think if I can get this concept out to kids, it's not just going to be helping them, it's also going to help parents breach that conversation, say, hey, guess what? I'm not going to tell you not to vape, but I'm going to tell you how to think about it when you're confronted with it. Right. And that's how we need to teach kids today. I'm not sure where that's going to go into sexual abuse and all that. I think there's always a way to pull one coping strategy from one area.
I mean, I can see it when you feel your boundaries are being crossed. Like, take a breath and stand up for your boundaries. One of the things is, your ABC, choose, and ultimately we want to get to choose you. Like, right. You don't have to come up with some lie. Just no, I don't do that. No, thanks. I'm not interested. Right. Ultimately choose you. And that's the same thing with sexual abuse. Someone's making you uncomfortable. You take a breath and go, no, this is not okay with me. I'm choosing me. And maybe you do have a bunch of phrases that could be totally true, or sometimes until we have that skill, right, we need those socially acceptable outs. I work in as a speech pathologist on social cognition. And so that is based in cognitive behavioral therapy. And I can't teach you every social skill. We like, this is how you introduce yourself. Well, if you're introducing yourself to your boss and you say, sup, right? Hey, sup. It's a whole different thing than if you go up to your friends and say, hey, sup, what's going on? Right. Right. And if you went to your friends with the boss greeting, right, it all gets weird and icky and it's unexpected and people feel uncomfortable. So right. I work a lot with people being able to be like, okay, I can't tell you everything to say, but I can teach you to read the clues, to understand when people feel uncomfortable, how they start to look, behave, speak, so that that, okay, I've done something that's making someone uncomfortable. Let me think of what I can do to change this. And the beauty of what I do is I create connection between people. And right. What a privilege. What a privilege to give people community. What a privilege to give people access to deeper connections and relationships and meaningful interactions. And it's similar to what you're saying, right? What are the choices? What do I know about this situation? What do I know about these people? Because maybe each phrase works differently with a different group. Who knows, right? But I do think it's a brilliant acronym, and there's a lot of room for learning within there.
Yeah, I go back to the moments that I had to make those choices growing up, and fortunately for me, I never did drugs. With ADD, I early realized. I think it was when Len Bias died. I'm not sure if you know who Len Bias was, but he was
of course I do.
Yeah. Best player in the country basketball. I think this was in the 80s, and he was the number 1 or whatever draft pick he was. And on his celebration night, he did coke for the first game and died. And so that kind of I thought to myself, oh shit, you can do coke and die the first time. Okay, maybe I better not do it. And that worked for Jeff Johnston, but for a lot of kids it didn't, and obviously for my son it didn't. He those stories out there. He was so fearless that at the end of the day, he was not afraid of dying, because right. You have to know that that's an outcome when you start doing heroin and things like that. That unless you just live on an island, that
our brains are very good at protecting us from what we don't want to see, know, kind of thing. So
right.
I mean, I one of the byproducts of my abuse, and it was very positive, and lots of people who have been in my situation, men and women, will turn to drugs or become promiscuous because that's the lesson they've been taught about their worth. But my need for control kept me from ever trying anything really. I was not a drinker in high school. I often had the excuse of being the designated driver. But I just, yeah, it wasn't for me. And I know there were times where I have gotten, a club soda and roses lime juice at a bar just so that nobody kept bothering me and like, hey, you need a drink, you need a drink, you
Right.
need a drink. I'm good, I'm good, I'm
Right.
good. Um, but yeah, that awareness that both of you and I had. I also didn't want to become addicted because I did not want to have to become unaddicted. I was unwilling
Right.
to try things that had that potential because of, the potential outcome. Um, but we are all different, and what works for us is going to be different. And so, like you said, just say no isn't going to work for everyone. And every group, every social group is different, a different dynamic. Something else is going to happen. We're talking about high school, but wait till you get in the work world. Someone gets promoted and they have a big party. You're
Right.
confronted with all sorts of things in that situation potentially too. But I ultimately, there's two things that I want to make sure we get in before we stop. Sorry, is you talked about being on medication, maybe for poison ivy or antibiotics that you can't drink with,
Right.
reminded me that I like to share with people that I take medication daily for depression. I haven't
Okay.
always, and I have on and off taken it, but
Right.
I know there are times when the things that work for me, my going for a walk, my journaling, my reaching out, and when they're not working, I know it's time for me, that my brain chemistry needs a boost to get me to a level playing field so that I can be in a place of dealing with whatever it is that's happening and going on and creating these feelings. The other thing that's important for me to mention to people is about meditation.
Yeah.
My meditation story is almost laughable. I've tried meditation a bunch of times before I became a meditator, and my attitude, not my conclusion was, I can't do it. I'm unable to meditate because I had been taught, like, clear your mind of everything, find a spot that's quiet, no extra stimuli, and just clear your. I'm ADD.
I
There
am
is
too.
no clearing this mind. I mean, that is just not going to happen. And for a lot of people, it's just not how their brain works, or what's going on in their life. Maybe it doesn't allow them to clear their mind. There
Right.
are things that they feel they really need to keep at the forefront, otherwise things are going to happen.
Right.
So for me, what worked is including a mantra. And I was taught a class by one of my therapists, actually got me hooked up with her mom, who was a meditation teacher. And her mom did a free class, and I sort of just sat in the back and listened. But she introduced this idea of, you're not clearing your head. Yes, you're coming back to your breath for some people. For me, it's coming back to the mantra. And the mantra is, on the inhale, it's so. So I'm thinking so, and on my exhale, it's hum the whole time. And it's Sanskrit for I am. Now, if I say I am, it's too much information for my brain to catch and start thinking
Right.
about. So it just,
Right.
so, And my meditation practice has a ton of sensory input in it. I have a candle that has a strong smell to keep me grounded. I have a rose quartz stone or crystal that I keep in my fridge or freezer. And then when I'm ready to meditate, I drop it into my bra, and it's against my heart chakra, and it's cold. So I really pay attention to it. And over the course of the meditation, it just warms up and disappears. I don't need that grounding anymore. Um, I have meditation music on. I'm telling you, every sense is engaged, and that's how I meditate. Every sense is
How long do
engaged
you
so that I
meditate
don't,
for?
I stay grounded and I don't get distracted by all the other sensory stimuli, and I come back to my mantra. And when things come in, cats come in, thoughts come in, an itch on my nose comes in, I thank my brain. I thank my brain and body for that,
Right.
because it's capable. And I move it along, or I say, you know what, great, thank you for reminding me. Remind me about that later, kind of thing. And I am not a first thing in the morning meditator. In fact,
Hmm.
I'm not necessarily a time of the day meditator. And I know that's a
Hmm.
big part of what we're taught about meditation. I need to get some things done first,
Right.
uh, and get some things off my plate so that my brain will really let go of those. And then I can meditate. And I started with 3 minutes that felt like an hour, went to
Yeah, I
five
know.
minutes, 8 minutes,
I
12
do
minutes,
10.
15 minutes, right? And I know I don't normally meditate beyond 15 minutes,
Yeah.
or at least that's not my expectation of myself. So I've made it something that I can do, um, and that fits me. When I tried to fit all of those other pieces in the way somebody else's practice looked, I failed every time.
Yeah.
When
The
I
great
honored
thing
what
about
I need,
meditation it's what narrative you want. I mean, if you're a religious person, meditation could be a spiritual religious thing. If you're agnostic like myself, it's not a divine communication with an entity. One thing I wanted to cover real quick before we wrap up, we're at an hour, but I think I could keep going for another hour. But you are so busy. I'm sure you've got your day stacked. One thing I thought about that I wanted to throw out there for people that are struggling with these things is uh, I'm a firm believer in something I've kind of invented for myself, and it involves me tricking my brain. I'm not that smart a human being. I don't think I'm that highly intelligent. By no means am I so intelligent that I'm having communications with other things that are telling me how to live my life. So I have to trick my brain. So I go back to my compulsive gambling. In my book, I write about my problem in my 20s and 30s when I was a really bad, not that there's a good compulsive gambler, but I was addicted to gambling and an alcoholic heavily. And those are not two good combinations when you're in the investment business. So now that I'm kind of semi-retired, I can talk about this. But I've always tricked my brain into one phrase that got me to quit gambling, literally overnight. And it's this idea that when you win, you lose. And what I meant by that is, and I heard a friend say that one time because we were having problems gambling, and I asked him how he quit, and he said, I told myself that even when I won a bet, I lost. And I thought, man, that's a great way for someone like me that's not that smart to trick my brain. So I did that in with drinking. I quit drinking. I said, you know what? When I get drunk, I lose. I never did drugs because if I got high, I lose. And so to me, there's so many ways I could use that story that I can try to teach kids that, hey, all these things, gambling, I don't know where the sexual addiction thing. I'm still very naive in, Nancy, and I need to figure out ways to add that aspect to my presentations because I have everything else covered. Drugs, alcohol, gambling, suicide, all these things. But I'm really I need to get much better at understanding how to communicate the sexual addiction topic to adolescents without a story. I don't have a sexual addiction story in my past that people can correlate to, but I know people that have, or maybe not addiction, but an event. So
Well, and I
where I'm
think
going with,
sorry,
go
it's
ahead.
probably easier than you think because you don't have the story, but you can extend your story by saying that, like, sexual pleasure, sexual addiction, it releases the same endorphins, the same rush that you got
As
when you
gambling,
gamble.
right,
Yeah. Or even,
right.
the sugar or whatever people are doing, it's the same
Hmm.
endorphins that are, the same neurochemicals, endorphins being one of them, that are triggered that flush the, just totally flood the body, not flush, flood the body, and you get that euphoric, great feeling. So it's just really an extension of what you already know, just to a different, area. But the mechanics are really very much the same.
Hmm.
And it's hard, I know, because it has the word sex, but
Right.
it's that's what it is. It's sex. It's addiction. Sex addiction. It's addiction to the pleasure that comes from the whatever sexual from sexual acts that cause this flood of neurochemicals, just like everything else. Um, that's really what it is. And you were talking about tricking your brain. Our brains are beautiful, highly evolved, intricate, like amazing machines that are really dumb.
I know.
Right. And so it's a tool that you use, like I
I like
use.
how you
It's
had
a
me going there. You had me going there,
Right. Well,
Jay.
yeah, it is. It's true. It's all true, right? I breathe without thinking about it. My everything
Right.
happens the way it happens because of, this neuron is telling this muscle to move. It's beyond, comprehension that such a system could
Right.
exist and work so seamlessly. However, our brains are little lemmings and they love us. And so they believe everything we tell them.
Hmm.
And that's a tool we can harness and use, right? If you tell
To our
yourself,
advantage, absolutely.
right, when I win, I lose, your brain's going to believe you. Yep, when you win, you lose. We're not doing that. If
Right.
I tell myself, oh my gosh, I'm so fat. Oh my gosh, I'm never going to be, no one loves me. Gosh, I can't do anything right. Your brain's going to go, yep, that's right. Let me collect all that evidence for you. And that's what you'll notice in the world, right?
It
That's what you
validates
see.
everything. Yep.
I'm
And
supporting your narrative. I believe in you. Yes, you're telling me the truth. Let me help you. Let me make
yeah,
it better. Let me show you all the ways that's true. And so one of the reasons I say no word is void, and I'm very much about reframing, is because our brains believe us. They very much believe us. It's same. They believe what other people say too. If you tell a kid they're worthless, you know, enough, they're going to believe they're worthless. That will
it's
become their
interesting
truth.
because your belief structure is such an important part of who you are for your identity.
Hmm.
However, when I look at people, I'm more attracted to how people behave and less what they believe. So,
Mm.
as me looking outwards to the world, I want to have a strong belief foundation. But me looking at somebody that's going to, um, you know, impress me in a way to motivate and change my life, I follow behavior. I follow the ones that walk the walk, the ones that talk the talk. I mean, you're a
Lead
good
by,
example.
yep.
You're a great example. Sam Gary's a great example. Steve Grant. These are all guests that I've had on that are been through things that they've said, "Hey, it's not going to define me in a negative way." Sure, it's going to define me, but not in a negative way. And
You know what? And what's funny is you say that is it doesn't for so long that was on the top of my list. I anorexic. I experienced sexual abuse. And I always thought that would be my identity. And there are long periods of time, not now because I'm talking about it all the time, but in my life,
mhm.
there have been long periods of times where I don't think about it at all. I have called my best friend Raquel and said, "Oh my God, I totally forgot I was anorexic." And she goes, because I read something in a book, and she goes, "Oh my God, that's right. You are. Oh my gosh, you used to eat the weirdest combinations of food, like broccoli and soy sauce, you know." And we had this
Yeah.
conversation, but I hadn't thought about it in so long because what it's become is a page in my book. And I
Yeah.
had a therapist say to me, "Someday this will be a page in your book and you will turn the page and it will not hurt the way it does. You will just be able to gaze upon it," was the words that they used. And I thought, oh, bullshit. I'm calling bullshit right here and right now. And quite frankly, it's become a page in my book that I can turn that page and there isn't pain. And I've come to the point where there's actually a little bit of a smile with it because
Hmm.
it's made me who I am. I like who I am. I like my purpose. I like that I'm fulfilling my purpose. And that makes me smile.
Well, the last few
Um,
pages of my book, my son wrote a song to his brother called "Open Book," and he sings it actually on the very first podcast I ever did. My son Roman sings it at the very end of the hour-long episode I had with my two boys, just talking about what we went through. And he wrote it to his brother who died of heroin, and it's called "Open Book," and it's the concept that we write pages and we write stories, and things come in and it forms chapters, and it is so for being, when he wrote this when he was 16, to be thinking that deeply is encouraging that kids can deal with things as long as they can figure out coping mechanisms. And one thing that
yeah.
I want to wrap this up with is I think you have lots of arrows in your quiver to fight what you're going through. And I do as well. And your story is an arrow in my quiver. And as I continue telling my story and meeting people like you. I have a person I'm interviewing on Friday. Her name's Danielle McLean. I met her on LinkedIn. She talks about her addiction issues. She was a prostitute, all these things, and now she owns an aerospace company. I mean, she's a freaking rock star, and
Our stories are
she's.
still untold. That's the
I
reality.
know, I know it, but it's like there's so many of us out there.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm part of this cult, but I'm part of this trauma cult, but in a way, as an ADD person, I don't know how I can say this, but I look forward to my depressive moments as much as I do my happy moments because I know my depressive moments out of that becomes great things. I told my young son that, Roman, I said, Roman, I don't know how to say this without sounding just odd, but I look forward to having my bad moments. I look forward to being on the floor crying because I know out of that something awesome is going to come out of it. So
I'm not as brave as you are. I don't look
I
forward
don't
to
know if
them.
that's brave. I'm
I'm,
not sure if that's
when
brave.
I'm in them, I don't know that I fully appreciate them. I I start to have appreciation, and afterwards, I'm thankful. Um, but if it's the same idea. It's the same idea. It's
Hmm.
because I know I'm thankful because I know that was a place of growth for me. Um, and that song, yeah, is pretty powerful wisdom from a 16-year-old. And I'm going to call it my community. Um,
Hmm.
instead of my cult because You can't. This is not something. Oh, only because these are my words and what resonates with me. For you, it's not
No, I
wrong.
don't call it a cult. That's just what my ADD brain said at the
Oh, I
moment.
say, okay, yes.
No,
It's
I don't. I don't. You're not part of my cult, so.
I can't be part of anyone's cult. I'm done with not thinking for myself and blindly accepting what someone tells me. So I
Right.
understand there's comfort in that for a lot of people, and there's psychology behind that, and that's a whole different conversation. But it's my community. It's my, it's not even my trauma community. It's my genuine having lived life to humans community. It's my very
You
human
gotta
community.
be. You gotta be so excited about the next 10 years of Nancy Barrows' life. I mean, you have to be just. I can see big things coming, and I'm excited about following you on social media and watching your story. And I guess as we wrap up, we're a little over an hour. How can people reach Nancy? What's if they're not on LinkedIn and Facebook and all these
Okay,
things? What are some
well,
good ways
because
to
I do
reach
work in
you?
the public schools, it's a little bit hard to find me. So, my, and I'm going to get this right, I think. My Facebook is Nancy Debra, Debra. And Instagram is vibing underscore with underscore Nancy. If you don't have LinkedIn, I would encourage you to join LinkedIn. You will be just
Mm-hmm.
pleasantly surprised and rewarded by the people that are there. But you are
I would
also
agree.
welcome to email me. And that is my name, Nancy, Nancy .d, as in Deborah, .barrows at gmail.com. I have 4 shows that I do a week right now, 2 of which that are streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. The first is The Island of Misfit Toys, which is a really fun show where 6 of us get together. We met like a week before the show started, and it's just as if you met some friends after work and have a conversation, and whatever comes up sort of comes up, and we all sort of give our opinion on it, and we ask our community and people who are in comments to participate in the discussion with us. And that is Thursdays, every Thursday night at 5:30 p.m. Pacific time. And then Connected Human Conversations, I'm a co-host with Mike Paterano, and that is also streamed to those same platforms, and that is Sunday evenings at 5 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. I am more behind the scenes on Brian Schulman's show, and if you're not connected with Brian Schulman, you guys should go find
Mm-hmm.
him, because he is he's incredible. I don't know that I can explain exactly what he gives. But it's positivity and it's support and encouragement, and it's fun. It's fun, fun, fun. And he does a show on Wednesday called What's Good Wednesday, and that's at 11 p.m. Pacific times. And he does Shout Out Saturday on Saturdays at 9 a.m. Pacific times. And I really encourage you guys. That's only on LinkedIn, unfortunately, right now. He was in other
I will be
places.
there. I will
Yeah,
be
be
there
there.
this
You'll be there.
Saturday.
And we have for both of those. This Wednesday is the 150th episode of What's Good Wednesday. And on Saturday, it's the 150th episode of Shout Out Saturday. And we are planning a really big celebration for that. So
Awesome.
if you haven't tuned in before, these would be great times to tune in. If you can't make it this week, make it another week. Same with the shows I'm on. They are really about the community that shows up. Um, I mean, last night, Connected Human Conversations, we actually had a guest on that we really worked through, and we're able to see the growth from his stuck place to a place of being able to move forward. So to me, that's so cool. I love seeing it in other people. I love being a part of it. So those are all the different places, and if none of that works, you can send me some smoke signals. I don't I that kind of
Well,
thing.
just they can always contact me because I'm going to have your contact
Yes,
information
yes,
probably
absolutely.
on the Living Undeterred website. Eventually, we're as you know that you could just do this stuff
Yes.
infinitely forever. So I'm trying to balance a lot of things, but I do want to remind people that the Living Undeterred website is productive. It's informational. It's educational. It's inspirational, and people can also subscribe to our YouTube channel. And I'm reminded by Molly to tell everybody to rate us 5 stars on Spotify and Apple Podcast. I don't have that rehearsed, so I have a little cheat sheet up here on my computer.
You know what I
I
just made me realize? I have a YouTube channel. I started it
Okay,
last week.
awesome,
So you
awesome.
can find me on YouTube, Nancy
I
Barrows.
will. I will. And I'm just like I said, I like the content part of all this, but distributing it is where I suffer the most. So I've got Molly and some other people help me out. But Nancy, I'm going to cut this off with just to tell you, I've never done that before. I don't know how to make that heart thing.
Yeah,
There
you
you
got
go.
it. That's it. You did it.
I've never done that before. I've seen you guys do it a bunch, but anyway, just honored to be along with this story that we're on to continue the conversation with people. And at the end of the day, no matter what you're going through, there is always somebody out there that you can lean on for help and guidance. And in my world, I like to tell people just live undeterred, never quit, keep fighting, find people like Nancy and Jeff, continue conversing with people, and pain is unavoidable in life, but suffering is always a choice, and I do believe that unequivocally. So again, Nancy, thanks a lot. I appreciate your time with this, and I'm sure our paths will cross many times.
Absolutely. I expect so.
Live, live undeterred. Thank you.
Thank you.